The October wind swept through Harlem streets, carrying fallen leaves across the cracked sidewalk where Miguel Alvarez trudged home from school. At 12 years old, his thin frame already carried the weight of adult worries. His once white sneakers, now gray and splitting at the seams, scuffed against the pavement as he pulled his threadbare jacket tighter around his shoulders. "Hey, Goodwill!" The taunt followed him from a group of boys across the street. "Same clothes 3 years running. When you gonna get something that fits?" Miguel ducked his head and quickened his pace. The laughter faded behind him as he turned the corner onto 125th Street. The familiar bustle of his neighborhood wrapping around him like a worn blanket. Past the bodega where Mr. Jimenez sometimes slipped him a free candy. Beyond the barbershop where men debated politics and basketball with equal passion. His stomach growled. Lunch had been small today. Half a sandwich shared with Jamal, who'd forgotten his again. Grandma Maria would be working her second shift at the hospital cafeteria until 9 tonight. The apartment would be empty, the refrigerator nearly the same. As he passed Sylvia's restaurant, the aroma of fried chicken and cornbread made his empty stomach ache. A sleek black SUV was parked outside, its driver waiting attentively beside it. The kind of car Miguel only ever saw in movies, or when celebrities visited the neighborhood for photo ops. That's when he saw it. A leather wallet lying on the sidewalk, partially hidden by a discarded newspaper. Miguel glanced around. No one was paying attention to him or the wallet. He quickly bent down and scooped it up, shoving it deep into his pocket before continuing home at a faster pace, heart pounding against his ribs. Inside the cramped one-bedroom apartment he shared with Grandma Maria, Miguel dropped his backpack on the worn couch that doubled as his bed. The radiator clanked and hissed in the corner, barely keeping the autumn chill at bay. Overdue bills were stacked neatly on the small kitchen table. Grandma system. Red stamps marked most of them. With trembling hands, Miguel pulled out the wallet. The leather was butter-soft, expensive in a way few things in his life had ever been. He opened it slowly, and his breath caught. The driver's license stared back at him. Denzel Washington. The face that had looked down from movie posters and smiled from TV screens was now looking up from a piece of plastic in Miguel's hands. "No way," he whispered, his voice echoing in the empty apartment. He flipped through the contents. Credit cards, business cards with gold lettering, and then cash. More cash than Miguel had ever seen in one place. He counted with shaking fingers. $5,000. $5,000. Miguel sat heavily on the couch, the wallet open in his lap. The money alone could solve everything. 3 months of back rent, Grandma's heart medication, new clothes that wouldn't make him a target at school, maybe even the used laptop he'd been eyeing in the pawn shop window, the one he could use to edit the short films he dreamed of making with his cracked secondhand phone. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, the familiar soundtrack of his neighborhood. On the wall, the only decoration in the living room caught his eye. A framed photo of his mother before drugs took her away, and beside it, a small cross. Below them sat his most prized possession, a battered notebook filled with handwritten scripts and carefully drawn storyboards, the dreams of a boy who believed stories could change lives. Miguel stared at the money for a long time, his young face reflected in the window as darkness fell over Harlem. Sleep refused to come that night. Miguel lay on the pull-out couch, the wallet hidden beneath his pillow, listening to his grandmother's labored breathing from the bedroom. Each wheezing inhale was a reminder of the medication she sometimes skipped to make it last longer. Maria Alvarez had raised Miguel since he was 4, when his mother disappeared into the grip of heroin, and his father had never been more than a name. At 67, her back was bent from decades of cleaning hotel rooms before switching to hospital work for the slightly better pay. Her hands were rough, calloused monuments to sacrifice. "We may not have much," she told him countless times in her accented English, But we have dignity. We have integrity. No one can take that from you unless you give it away. The wallet seemed to burn beneath his pillow. When morning light filtered through the threadbare curtains, Miguel had made his decision. He carefully copied the address from one of the business cards in the wallet, a production company in Midtown. With the wallet secured in his backpack, he left a note for Grandma saying he didn't feel well and was staying home from school. As soon as she left for her morning shift, Miguel put on his cleanest clothes. Jeans with only one small hole at the knee and a faded blue hoodie that was just slightly too small. He studied his reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, trying to smooth down his unruly black hair. Dark circles shadowed his eyes from the sleepless night. "You can do this," he told his reflection, not entirely convinced. The subway ride from Harlem to Midtown stretched Miguel's nerves to the breaking point. Each stop brought him closer to a world that seemed to exist on another planet from his own. As skyscrapers replaced tenements outside the windows, Miguel clutched his backpack tighter, the wallet inside feeling impossibly heavy. The production company occupied 3 floors of a gleaming glass tower. Miguel stood across the street for nearly 20 minutes, watching people in suits and fashionable clothes enter and exit with purpose. His courage nearly failed him twice before he finally crossed the street and approached the revolving door. The security guard at the desk eyed him suspiciously. "Can I help you, kid?" His tone suggested the opposite. Miguel swallowed hard. I need to return something to Mr. Washington. Denzel Washington." The guard's expression shifted from suspicion to amusement. "Sure you do. And I'm Will Smith." "Please," Miguel insisted, his voice cracking slightly. "I found his wallet. It has everything in it. His ID, credit cards, money. Everything." The guard's smile faded as Miguel carefully pulled out the wallet, holding it up but not relinquishing it. "Wait here," the guard said after a long pause. He picked up his phone and spoke quietly into it, occasionally glancing at Miguel. Minutes later, a harried-looking woman in a sharp suit emerged from the elevator. "You found Mr. Washington's wallet?" she asked without preamble. Miguel nodded, still clutching the wallet. "Yes, ma'am. Outside Sylvia's in Harlem yesterday. Everything's still in it." The woman studied him intently. "Mr. Washington has been looking for this since yesterday afternoon. You didn't take anything from it?" "No, ma'am." Miguel handed over the wallet, his fingers reluctant to let go of what might have been his family's salvation. The woman opened it, quickly checking the contents. Her eyebrows rose slightly as she counted the cash. "What's your name?" she asked, her tone softer now. "Miguel Alvarez." "Well, Miguel Alvarez, this is quite remarkable." She pulled out her phone. "Let me take your contact information. Mr. Washington will want to thank you personally." As she entered his details into her phone, Miguel made a decision that surprised even himself. He reached into his backpack and pulled out his notebook, dog-eared and worn, filled with his handwritten stories and carefully drawn storyboards. Could you give him this too?" Miguel asked, holding out the notebook. "It's my scripts and ideas. I want to make film someday." His voice grew quieter with each word, embarrassment coloring his cheeks. The woman took the notebook with a curious expression. "I'll make sure he gets it," she said, though Miguel couldn't tell if she meant it. As Miguel turned to leave, she called after him. "Why didn't you keep the money, Miguel? That was a lot of cash." Miguel paused at the revolving door, thinking of his grandmother's face, of the cross on their wall, of the lessons that had been the only consistent inheritance in his young life. "Because it wasn't mine," he said simply, and stepped into the bright October sunshine. The 3 days that followed were among the longest of Miguel's young life. He'd returned to school the next day, facing the same taunts, the same hunger pangs, the same worn textbooks. But something had shifted inside him, a quiet certainty that he had done the right thing, even as doubt whispered that he'd thrown away their one chance at relief. When Jamal asked why he'd missed school, Miguel merely shrugged and changed the subject. The truth would sound too fantastical, and he wasn't ready for the inevitable questions about why he hadn't kept the money. He wasn't sure he could explain it to himself, let alone anyone else. At home, he hadn't told Grandma Maria either. She had enough burdens without adding his strange encounter to the list. Besides, nothing would come of it. The woman at the production company had probably thrown his notebook away as soon as he left, and Denzel Washington had surely forgotten about the wallet incident minutes after it was resolved. Wednesday afternoon found Miguel sitting at the kitchen table, trying to concentrate on algebra homework while Grandma Maria prepared a simple dinner of rice and beans. The radio played softly in the background, old boleros that reminded her of Puerto Rico, though she'd left the island nearly 40 years ago. "Your mind is elsewhere, Mijo," she observed, stirring the pot with hands that seemed to have aged extra years in recent months. "School problems?" "Just tired," Miguel replied, offering a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Unusual. They rarely had visitors, especially on weekdays. "Are we expecting anyone?" Maria asked, wiping her hands on her apron. Miguel shook his head, equally puzzled. His grandmother moved to the door, checking through the peephole before gasping softly. "Quien es?" Miguel asked, rising from his chair. Instead of answering, Maria crossed herself quickly and opened the door, revealing a tall man in a casual but impeccably tailored jacket. Behind him stood a younger man carrying what looked like shopping bags. Denzel Washington stood in their doorway, his presence immediately filling their small apartment with an almost surreal quality. He smiled warmly at Maria, whose hand had flown to her mouth in shock. "Mrs. Alvarez? I'm Denzel Washington. I hope I'm not intruding, but I wanted to thank your grandson personally." Miguel froze halfway across the living room, unable to process what was happening. The man from the movie posters, from DVD covers, from Oscar ceremonies watched on their ancient TV, was standing in their apartment, speaking to his grandmother as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Miguel?" Washington turned to him with a genuine smile. "It's good to finally meet you. I hear I owe you a debt of gratitude, and an apology for keeping your notebook for so long. I hope you don't mind, but I couldn't put it down." Maria looked between the famous actor and her grandson, confusion evident on her tired face. "Miguel? What is happening?" Miguel finally found his voice. I found Mr. Washington's wallet 3 days ago, outside Sylvia's. It had fallen on the sidewalk, with $5,000 cash inside," Washington added, watching Maria's eyes widen. "Your grandson returned every penny, along with this remarkable notebook of film ideas." He held up Miguel's battered notebook. "Which is why I'm here." The next hour passed in a blur. Washington's assistant brought in groceries, filling their nearly empty refrigerator and cabinets while the actor sat at their small kitchen table, speaking with Miguel about his film ideas as if they were colleagues rather than a world-famous star and a poor kid from Harlem. Maria moved around the kitchen in a daze, repeatedly offering coffee and apologizing for their humble home, until Washington gently assured her that he'd grown up in a place not so different. "Your grandson has a natural storyteller's instinct," Washington told Maria as he flipped through the notebook. "This scene here," he pointed to one of Miguel's careful drawings, "shows a visual intelligence that many film school graduates lack." Miguel watched, hardly daring to breathe, as his two worlds collided. His everyday reality of struggle and privation, and his dream world of stories and cinema. "I'd like to help Miguel develop his talent," Washington said finally, turning to Maria with seriousness in his eyes. "With your permission, of course." Maria sat heavily in the kitchen chair, her expression a complex mixture of pride, hope, and caution born from decades of having dreams deferred. "What does this mean exactly?" "To start, a proper laptop for writing and editing, a better camera, software, books. Washington listed these items casually, as if they weren't objects Miguel had longed for endlessly. And mentorship, meetings with screenwriters and directors who can guide him, a place in a young filmmaker's workshop my foundation supports. He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. And if you'll allow it, Mrs. Alvarez, I'd like to establish an educational trust for Miguel, for college and film school, when he's ready. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hiss of the rice cooker and the distant sirens that formed the soundtrack of their neighborhood. Why? Maria asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would you do this for someone you don't know? Washington's expression softened. Because integrity like Miguel's is rare, Mrs. Alvarez. I've been fortunate in my life. Very fortunate. But I never forget where I came from, or the people who helped me along the way. He turned to Miguel. Someone once took a chance on me. Now I'd like to take a chance on you. Miguel looked to his grandmother, whose eyes shimmered with unshed tears. In that moment, he saw something he hadn't seen in her face for a long time. Hope, unguarded and luminous. As Miguel's film played on the large screen, the audience sat transfixed. The raw honesty of his storytelling, capturing both the harshness and beauty of life in Harlem, resonated through the theater. His camera lingered lovingly on the faces of neighborhood elders, celebrated the vibrant street art, and acknowledged the struggles without defining the community by them alone. The final scene showed Maria standing on their apartment rooftop at dawn, the rising sun bathing Harlem in golden light as she looked out over the neighborhood that had both challenged and embraced them. Her voice narrated in Spanish with English subtitles. We endure. We persist. We find beauty in struggle. This is the legacy I give to my grandson. Not wealth or privilege, but the richness of knowing who you are and standing firm in your truth. When the lights came up, there was a moment of profound silence before the applause began, swelling until it filled the theater. Miguel sat stunned, feeling his grandmother's hand squeezing his, tears streaming down her face. Washington leaned over, whispering, "That's what it feels like when you touch people's hearts, Miguel. Remember this moment." The festival director approached their row, inviting Miguel to the stage. On shaky legs, he made his way forward, turning to face the audience that was still applauding. Miguel Alvarez's film, Hands That Hold Us, demonstrates an exceptional maturity and visual poetry rarely seen in filmmakers twice his age, the director announced. The jury has unanimously awarded him the Young Visionary Award, which includes a scholarship to the Summer Filmmaking Intensive at NYU. Miguel accepted the small trophy, its weight substantial in his hands. At the microphone, he found his voice. "Thank you. I want to dedicate this to my grandmother, Maria Alvarez, who taught me that integrity is the only thing no one can take from you." He paused, gathering courage. "And to Mr. Denzel Washington, who showed me that sometimes doing the right thing opens doors you never knew existed." The audience's eyes turned to Washington, who acknowledged the moment with a modest nod, directing the attention back to Miguel. After the ceremony, as they gathered in the reception area, filmmakers and industry professionals approached Miguel with business cards and words of encouragement. A professor from NYU Film School spoke intently with him about his college plans, now a reality thanks to the trust fund. Maria stood slightly apart, watching her grandson navigate this new world with growing confidence. Washington joined her, both of them observing Miguel's transformation from a distance. "You raised an extraordinary young man, Mrs. Alvarez," Washington said quietly. Maria nodded, her eyes never leaving Miguel. "I always knew he was special, but the world, it is not always kind to special children from Harlem." "No," Washington agreed. "It's not, but sometimes all they need is one door to open." He smiled as Miguel enthusiastically described a camera technique to an attentive film professor. And once Miguel walks through his door, I have a feeling he'll hold it open for others. As the event wound down, Miguel rejoined them, his award clutched carefully in one hand, a collection of business cards in the other. "Ready to go, Mijo?" Maria asked, noting the fatigue beginning to show beneath his excitement. "Yes," Miguel nodded, then turned to Washington. "Thank you for coming today. For everything." Washington clasped his shoulder firmly. "This is just the beginning, Miguel. The real work starts now. Call me next week. We'll set up that meeting with the documentary filmmaker I told you about." Outside, as their driver held the car door open, Miguel paused to look back at the venue. 6 months ago, finding that wallet had presented him with a simple but profound moral choice. One that tested everything his grandmother had taught him about integrity and character. The easiest path would have been to keep the money, solving their immediate problems, but compromising something essential within himself. Instead, he had chosen the harder path, uncertain where it might lead, but knowing it was right. That choice had not simply changed their financial circumstances. It had expanded Miguel's sense of what was possible in his life. The boy who had once walked with his eyes downcast, trying to avoid notice, now stood straight-backed, meeting the world's gaze directly. In the car heading uptown, Miguel sat between his grandmother and his mentor, the trophy resting on his lap. Through the window, he watched the city transition from the gleaming towers of Lower Manhattan to the familiar streets of Harlem. No longer just the place where he lived, but the community whose stories he would tell. The wallet had contained $5,000, a sum that had seemed life-changing in the moment. What it actually contained, Miguel now understood, was a test of character and a key to a future he could never have imagined. As they turned onto their street, the setting sun cast long shadows between the buildings. Maria reached over and took Miguel's hand, her eyes communicating everything words could not: pride, love, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing her grandson recognized not for what he had, but for who he was. "Remember," she said softly in Spanish, "your integrity brought you here, not luck. Never forget that, Mijo." Miguel nodded, clutching his award. The wallet had been valuable, but what he'd gained by returning it was beyond price. Not just opportunity or mentorship, but the unshakable knowledge that in a world that often rewarded the wrong things, doing right still mattered. Some treasures, once discovered, transformed everything that followed. For Miguel Alvarez, the true treasure hadn't been in the wallet at all, but in the choice he made about it. A choice that had changed not just his circumstances, but the very course of his life. As they stepped out onto the familiar sidewalk of their neighborhood, neighbors called out congratulations, having followed the day's events through the community grapevine. Miguel stood taller, no longer just a boy from Harlem with dreams too big for his circumstances, but a young filmmaker with the confidence to turn those dreams into reality. Proof that sometimes the most courageous act is simply staying true to who you are, even when no one is watching.